from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast.
Coming up on Ag Day, another week, another meeting on the renewable fuel standard. Plus,
I'm Michelle Rook. Mexican soybean processing plants are switching over to South American sources because they're concerned about NAFTA. The story coming up.
In agribusiness, is corn turning a corner?
We possibly are in a year now where Argentina, Brazil, China, United States all could see smaller crops than the previous year at a time when demand is growing.
Machinery Pete has auction prices on new classics, and it's strawberry picking time in Louisiana.
Ag Day, brought to you by the Chevy Silverado, the most dependable, longest-lasting full-size pickups on the road.
Good Monday morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Hope you had a good weekend. Later today, the ethanol and oil industries are expected back in Washington to discuss the renewable fuel standard. The White House making plans for another gathering Monday. Both the corn and oil industries expected to have representatives on hand to discuss potential changes to the nation's biofuels policy. Following the previous meeting, discussions swirled around a plan that would put a 2-year cap on RIN prices while allowing blends of E15 to be sold year-round, which could also help drive down those RIN prices.
If you believe that the high cost of RINs is a problem, and we don't, by the way, but if you bought into that narrative, there are 2 ways to lower the price of RINs. You can reduce demand and therefore lower the price of RINs, or you can increase demand. You can sell more ethanol. You can put more RINs into the marketplace that will reduce the cost of those compliance credits.
Unlike previous meetings on the issue, reports say President Trump is not expected to be in attendance. However, lawmakers from both sides will likely be part of the gathering. Also in Washington, some key Republican lawmakers continuing to push back at the president's decision to impose tariffs on steel and aluminum imports. Wisconsin Senator Ron Johnson chairs the Senate Oversight Committee. He's launching a review of the tariff decision. Johnson has asked the Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross to answer several questions about the move. Johnson is looking for a detailed cost analysis of the impact on the economy, how employment levels were factored into the decision, and national security concerns. President Trump's tariff plan excludes Canada and Mexico from the steel and aluminum tax. Canada is the largest shipper of steel to the U.S. at 16% of total U.S. steel imports. It's also the largest exporter of aluminum. Mexico accounting for 9% of steel shipped into the U.S. The president said he would exempt the 2 countries while negotiating for changes to the North American Free Trade Agreement. The new tariffs will take effect in about 2 weeks. While Mexico catches a break from the metal tariffs, NAFTA is still far from a done deal. The country continuing to look for other sources of grain in the event NAFTA renegotiations don't work out. While in Mexico, Michelle Rook talked to several agricultural companies that are concerned about the future of NAFTA.
This soybean processing plant here in Mexico gets 70% of its soybeans from the U.S., but because of NAFTA has been switching some of their source over to Brazil and South America. They're preparing in case either country withdraws from NAFTA or the tariffs on U.S. imports, including soybeans, return.
Right now with the situation, we don't know if maybe taxes or something. We are moving and starting to explore the South American market.
However, Mexican ag companies agree South America isn't their first choice for imports.
It's not the best way. The transits for the vessels are much longer. The freight rates are much more higher. So for sure we will prefer to work with the U.S.
With Mexico's climate, they import over 90% of their grain and oilseed needs, and the majority comes from the U.S., so tensions are running high.
Almost all 80% of our formula came from there, so we are very concerned about that.
Company officials say NAFTA has been good for both countries, and they want to keep the status quo.
It's just going to make things complicated. Prices are going to go up. So I think it's a treaty that must continue.
In fact, Mexico has FTAs with other countries, but they place the highest value on NAFTA.
The most important, I can say, is NAFTA. So that makes the business easier.
So the hope is all 3 partners will stay at the table and modernize, but not walk away from the trade deal.
I think it's really important that this NAFTA doesn't change anything and only reinforce and get better.
In Mexico, I'm Michelle Rook reporting for Ag Day.
Thanks, Michelle. A draft of the new farm bill may be released from the House of Representatives as early as this week. According to Farm Journal policy analyst House Ag Chair Mike Conaway wants to release the House version as early as this week. If that happens, it could potentially begin work right after the Easter break. Meanwhile, Senate Ag Chair Pat Roberts hinting he's preparing for an April Farm Bill start there in the Senate. Farm groups continuing to hope a Farm Bill gets completed yet this year.
Waiting for the House to go first and the Senate to look at it and then the Senate to take action and to have a 3 or 4 month lull in between is not uncommon. That would be a normal cycle. So if the House was to act in March or April, that would give kind of the summer time for the Senate to act and then do something either in July or in September to pass it.
The Wall Street Journal reporting takeover talks between Bunge and Archer Daniels Midland are on pause. The report says two of the world's largest grain traders and processors are struggling to find agreement even after more than a month of negotiations. The deal would have allowed ADM to expand its footprint in South America. It's unclear whether talks will resume. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers have opened a spillway 30 miles from New Orleans to help divert water from the rising Mississippi River into Lake Pontchartrain. Record rainfall and snow melt in the upper Mississippi Valley have now worked their way south to the Gulf. The flood control structure was built in the 1930s, but it's only been opened a dozen of times since 1931. By opening this relief valve of sorts, the Corps is easing pressure on the levee system and reducing the risk of flooding in New Orleans. Southwest Kansas, like many regions of the Central Plains, turning to kindling for wildfires. This is Clark County, Kansas, an area that suffered through a massive wildfire just 1 year ago. Since that fire, the area received about 21 inches of rain in the course of 2 months. That's above the area's annual rainfall. The rain causing pasture grasses to grow, creating abundant fuel for wildfires now today. Drought has set in. There's a lack of forage, and some wheat conditions are deteriorating quickly.
We haven't had a significant rainfall, and I say significant, I haven't had a measurable rainfall since September of last year. We've had a few heavy dews and some frosts, but nothing substantial. And so we're very dry.
Grant Gardner says last week's fire chewed through 500 acres, but they didn't lose any livestock. Last year, they lost 42,000 acres of native grass and 500 head of cattle. Sydney Clausen's back in to start the week once again for Mike Hoffman. She joins us for today's crop comments. Good morning, Sydney.
Good morning, Clinton. Let's start off in Dike, Iowa. Ryan Peterson's showing us a picture that sums up how his week is going. This one is from a day when he had rain, ice, sleet, a snow mix, all of it in one day. The drought monitor shows much of Iowa is in the same position. Nearly 27% of the state is abnormally dry. And moving over to our friends from the north, Lawrence McLaughlin from Ontario is making maple. The syrup is boiled to 242 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it's thick enough to put through a candy machine to make sugar. Yum. Did you know it takes 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup? Yeah. I tapped my tree at home. All right, let's take a look at our estimated rainfall from the last week. And you can see a lot of it has been on the East Coast. We have had a little bit in the central part of the United States as well. And as we zoom in, a couple of spots to note, especially off in the Northeast, we've had a fair amount of rain down in the Gulf Coast states, and we've had a little rain over, especially towards the Mississippi River as well. But a lot of the country has been on the dry side as well. We'll have your national forecast coming up in just a few minutes, but now here are some hometown temps.
Ever wake up wondering what does today's weather have in store? Well, with weather updates, it delivers the local forecast right to your cell phone each morning to make preparing for the day easier. Just text Weather 6 to 31313 to get started.
When we come back, the dynamics of today's corn markets. We'll hear why one analyst thinks we may be about to turn a corner.
Stay tuned, folks. Coming up, I'll tell you about 2 unusual tractors that sold at auction last week.
And if you're headed south for spring break, be on the lookout for freshly picked strawberries. We'll check the Louisiana berry patch later on AgDay. In agribusiness, a mixed day. Grains were down, livestock and financials higher. Let's get the final tally from our friends on the floor.
We are under a pretty significant amount of pressure across the board, but really centered in soybeans. Soybeans down as much as 22 cents here today. Sort of a delayed reaction from a bearish USDA WASDE report that we had on Thursday. The report on Thursday was a little bit bullish for corn, and we chose to really focus on that on Thursday with corn being higher. But as the dust has settled and we've really been able to have a chance to read between the lines of the soybean report, we've realized that it is really quite bearish, and we are seeing some follow through to the downside here today. One of the main reasons why soybeans have been higher here over the last couple of months was the idea that a problem in South America could mean more business for the United States. The USDA is saying that is not the case. After a heavy day in the cattle yesterday, we are trying to keep our heads above water here on a Friday and bounce back from the breakout to the downside that we saw. Now, going back to Thursday, we broke some key chart support points in both live cattle and feeder cattle and did break out to the downside a little bit, running some stops, and your funds were noted sellers getting out of some of their long position that they have built up. This is Ted Seifert of Zaner Ag Hedge coming to you from the CME floor.
We caught up with Arlen Suderman, INTL FC Stone. Arlen, as we look at this corn market, of course we're watching soybeans, we're watching wheat, we're trying to see what's going to happen in all these markets, but what about corn? What's corn doing right now?
I really like the dynamics of corn long term. Now I'm looking out 2 to 3 years with that starting to happen now, but it'll take time to develop. We put the lows in 2016, 2017 lows are above 2016, we build on that in 2018. We possibly are in a year now where Argentina, Brazil, China, United States all could see smaller crops than the previous year at a time when demand is growing. The big surpluses are really in China and United States. China's surpluses are going down fast. There's question about what the size of those are, but the bottom line is demand is growing faster than supply. So we're moving in the right direction. Wheat is kind of a lid on the corn market. The drought in the plains is helping remove that lid a little bit, helping prices drift higher. I like the slow grind higher nature of the market.
Yeah. As you kind of evaluate the demand, what size acreage, what size crop for corn do you see this year, and how does that play later on?
Yeah, in many of the corn acres, the last few percent, the decisions made in April and May, depending on weather. Right now, going into it, we're looking at about 89 million acres, so that's down a little bit. We'll lose some in the south, we'll lose some in the other fringe areas. The core is pretty much there, not really changing that too much. See more of a shift to soybeans in some of those areas that are becoming available from some other crops.
Okay, so it could be an interesting year from your perspective in corn.
Oh, absolutely, and I think the trend is moving in the right direction from a producer standpoint. End users need to be paying attention.
All right, good news. Everybody likes that. End on an up note. All right, appreciate it, Arlen. We'll be back with more Ag Day in just a minute.
Contact Arlen Suderman by email at arlen.suderman@intlfcstone.com. Ag Day, brought to you by Alivo Seed Treatment from Bayer. Protect your soybeans from SDS and nematodes this season.
Welcome back to Ag Day on this Monday morning. Cindy Clausen looking at the jet stream, and Cindy, boy, this is a pretty predominant trough and ridge.
Yeah, you know, and we've seen a trough over the eastern part of the country for quite some time now. We'll finally start to see some changes, though, as we head through the week. Let's take a look. And yeah, we've had this trough that's been extending over the northeastern part of the country. We've had chilly temperatures for a lot of the last week across much of the northeastern United States. The warmer temperatures have been out west. Well, things are going to change as we start to see that ridge starting to translate into the central part of the country. The trough still holds tight, so we're still going to start off the week on the cool side in the east, but then watch what happens. We'll still see that ridge continuing then to warm things up in the east while we see another trough moving into especially the southwestern part of the United States, and that's going to bring some stormy weather there. As we head into the weekend, we'll see that trough starting to translate into the nation's midsection, but overall we'll start to see some warmer temperatures, especially in the east, while things kind of level off, if not cool down, out in the west. Here's a look at what we expect for the week as a whole. We're going to continue with the cooler than normal temperatures, especially for the early part of the week. It will warm up, especially later in the week, but it's going to be a longer time, of course, for folks further off to the east. Slightly cooler than normal in parts of the northern plains as well. The warm temperatures hanging out in the Four Corners region and western parts of the plains. As far as precipitation, we're looking at below normal for parts of the upper Midwest. Below normal for the plains. Really dry here. This is not a good thing. We need some moisture there. And below normal as we get just along the east coast. Looks like it's going to be wet, though, with that cutoff low coming on to the west coast. Our 30-day temperatures on the cool side for much of the northwestern quarter of the country. Fairly normal in the east, but a little warm as you get down towards Florida and in some of the southern plains and Four Corners region. Heading into our 30-day precipitation, I know a lot of folks really watching this one, and we're going to be seeing above normal precipitation from the northeast, mid-Atlantic states down into the central Gulf states. Also above normal precipitation in the northwest, but the areas that have been very dry, and we've seen the drought expanding. Unfortunately, it looks like it's going to stay that way as we see below normal precipitation for the western parts of the central and southern plains and on into the Four Corners region. That's a look at your national forecast. And then let's check out the weather where you live. Orange Cove, California, mostly sunny for you today with a high of 71 degrees. Blue Springs, Missouri, mostly sunny, a little bit warmer with a high of 46. And Greene, Ohio, partly cloudy with a bit of light snow possible.
Machinery Pete says vintage tractors are fetching top dollar, including some that celebrate the spirit of America. And strawberry season is upon us across the South. We'll check on the conditions later on Ag Day.
Ag Day, brought to you by Corvus, the #1 pre-emergence corn herbicide.
Machinery Pete donning the red, white, and blue this morning to show how the spirit of '76 is still worth celebrating, even at the auction.
All right, folks, we got to talk about two highly unusual tractors that sold at auction last week. Now, here's a picture of a 1964 John Deere 4020. This sold a week ago Saturday on the 34th annual spring consignment sale in Murfreesboro, Illinois by Canning Auction Service. Interesting story here on the tractor. It was completely rebuilt, $40,000 in new parts back in 2014 by the Massac County High School FFA chapter. And they had a benefit and they raffled this tractor off. Now the guy who won it held it for a while and then was thinking of selling it. And he was offered $18,000 shortly before the auction and almost took it, but decided to put it on the auction, and it sold for $28,000. Now even though $40,000 new parts in it, that's still a very strong price, $28,000. In fact, I think it's tied for the 11th highest auction price I've ever seen on a 4020. Now last Wednesday, our friends at BigIron.com, their weekly online auction, sold this tractor, a 1976 Case 1570 Spirit of 76. It was from Elnora, Indiana, and it was showing just over 5,200 hours on it and sold for $17,250. That's the third highest auction price I've seen on these rare Spirit of 76 tractors, which I think they made about 200 of them. And the all-time record high, well, that was just back on December 2nd on a farm auction in Olney, Illinois by Rothrock Auction Service. Here's a picture of it, 76 model, 1,682 actual hours on it, brought $34,000.
So to come, we visit strawberry fields in Louisiana to see how they dealt with a cold snap this winter. In the Country is next.
In the Country, sponsored by Kubota. Tractors, hay tools, utility vehicles, mowers, and more. Visit KubotaUSA.com today.
The arrival of spring-like weather has been a boon to Louisiana strawberry growers. Record cold temperatures in January chilled the crops, but now the berries are nearing their peak production. Craig Gautreaux from the LSU Ag Center checks on the crop.
The arrival of warmer weather in February made a big difference in Louisiana strawberry fields. Snow in December and record cold temperatures in January brought production to a halt, but now the berries are blooming and ripening as they approach peak season.
We've got the springtime weather coming. It seems like these berries have bloomed overnight, and we're starting to see some wonderful berries because of that, and right now our farmers are picking.
At Foss Farms, berry picking usually starts in November and ends in April. This year they are hoping to extend the season.
We did plant some later varieties, and we are hoping that they can stay with us even until Mother's Day, and so we're hoping that that makes up for what we've lost.
What they lost was more than a month's production because of inclement weather. Blooms were burnt and fruit was damaged. It takes at least 21 days after a strawberry flowers to develop into a juicy red piece of fruit.
That's always a tough lick when you're a farmer and you can see, what you could have gotten just to throw it away.
Consumers should have plenty of berries to buy and the satisfaction of knowing they can contribute to the local economy.
It's food that's less traveled, so you get a lot more flavor out of it when it's less traveled. And you know, they're just the best.
You're getting the freshest and most delicious product, especially with Louisiana strawberries, but also you're helping out your fellow neighbor.
With the LSU Ag Center, this is Craig Gautreaux reporting.
And that's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. Spend part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day in farm country.
AgDay, brought to you by Ram Commercial, America's longest-lasting heavy-duty pickups.